Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Emily Moyer. Michael Wan is with me, and this is Project Kids number 13. It's been a few weeks since we've done one of these episodes. We've been very busy playing the glass bead game, but it's Project Kids today. Welcome back, Michael. How you doing?
I am doing well. It is always a pleasure. When you say 13, I'm so confused as to the number of times we've spoken on the computer box because we've got all these different ways it happens. And then I'm like, it's been more than 13, but I don't know. So like, how many times do you think we've had conversations that have been recorded that we've shared between all of the different things?
Well, the first time we ever did it was on Conspiracy Cocktail, which isn't recorded. So that was our first conversation. You were my first ever guest on Conspiracy Cocktail, and which has turned into like a really cool, amazing thing. And then that was the first time I met you too. Like Steve was just like, I think you should have this guy on tonight. And so then you were there and the rest is history.
The rest is history. That was like it was March of last year, right?
Yeah.
We've probably done maybe, I would say 20 shows, 30 shows.
So then we had you on Off Planet Radio, right? So you were on Off Planet Radio with Randy and I. So that was the first time we were recorded. Then we've done 13. This is the 13th Project Kids. So that already takes us up to 15 things we've done together and 3 glass bead games. So 18, something about somewhere between 18 and 20.
You just pulled that like 15 plus 3 out. Like, I can't even believe you did that math so quickly.
I'm pretty good at math.
You're very good at math. So this is what we talked about this a couple moments ago, like before we started recording. This last week feels like we've entered into something like, it's just like, this everything's shifting. We're beginning to understand with greater and greater detail what everything is. Like, that's what revelation means. It's revealing. It's like, oh, this is how it works, particularly for those of us like you and me and anyone who's watching, who's like, I want to understand what's going on. And so this show, number 13, is also feels like, maybe number 1, or it's like, we're in the next stage, whatever it is. And this was the clue which I had. This was the clue which I had. You mentioned that like before we started recording a couple moments ago. But what you don't know, this happened to me last night. So last night, I like to do an evening meditation. I like to do an evening meditation. And, I like to get kind of freaky with my meditation. And what that means is just with crystals, all of you other people, you take that out, that's what I mean with crystals. And so one of the things I normally wear a beanie hat and it folds up, and I like to there are 2 crystals. I put one in the hat here and one in the back there, and I do some other stuff. So that's what I mean about freakiness. And so this is my like primary bag. This is my primary bag right here. I've had this for years, and how it's set up is I've got these 2 pockets right here where I've got like long, thin crystals. I've got right here, you can see where those pockets are. This opens up. And then I've got a bigger one where I've got a crystal right there, and it folds up. It's like a traveler's bag. So anyway, I take off my hat after my freaky deaky meditation. And one of the crystals, these are nice crystals too. It's like all crystals are nice. They're like human beings. Like everyone's is an individual. I'm not like picking. Well, yeah, I am picking favorites, but I'm saying they're all good. So these are my favorites, and these are nice crystals. And for those who like to get into the crystal world, the crystal which I'm about to show you, they would call it a Lumerian singing crystal. Ooh. And so I kept it. I keep it like right here, my third eye. I like to meditate with it. And I take my hat off, and I'm like, ooh, and it falls on the ground, and it breaks.
Oh.
It falls on the ground and it breaks. And the way I meet reality is like, I don't believe in mistakes. I don't believe in anything like that. There may be things you don't want to happen. There may be things like, I wish that didn't happen, but it's like that happened. And there's a reason. And particularly when you're dealing with like crystals and meditations and like really like, stuff which is specifically designed to help you connect beyond just like the matrix reality. Like when that breaks, I'm like, all right, well, there's something. And I've been thinking about that all friggin' morning. I'm like, you know, what broke? What was this crystal about? Like looking into this and thinking about it. But like, you know, I might not know specifically. I've got some ideas, but what the broken crystal is. But what I can say with a certainty is that the time in which I use this crystal is no more. And
Yep.
so that's why I know. I'm like, we're in a different time.
So I have a great story for you, and I'm
All
going
right,
to
tell
tell
me.
the story in just a minute. But before we get into this story, since we've acknowledged that we're into a new world, Project Kids is also into a new world, and so we have an announcement today. So there's a couple of ways that people have been receiving this content. Obviously, we create some public content here on YouTube. There's been some stuff over on my Patreon that Michael gets a portion of, and that still exists. If you want the full Project Kids experience, which includes all of the content of both Project Kids shows and the glass bead game. If you want access to the Project Kids social club, where we all hang out a couple times a week and just chatter and like connect dots further off the quilt and whatnot. And that also generates some clips that are available to receive as content. That is available on my Patreon, patreon.com/offplanetmedia. That is a $25 level. It includes a ton of stuff. Michael gets a portion of that, all content and all interactive activities and recordings of those set activities. But there's a lot of people I know who really don't have time to participate or don't want to participate, but would like to receive all of the content. And we've been trying to figure out a way to separate that out. And so I have created a locals page that is just for Project Kids. It will contain all of the Project Kids content, both public and private. So you can go on the locals page and just be a member and you'll receive the free content there. It doesn't cost anything. It's a great place to follow us because if we do, for some reason, get taken off of YouTube or Facebook, this functions like a combination of YouTube, Facebook, and Patreon. So you can post public content there. And it's not, I have issues with Dave Rubin, but I don't think he's a censorer. And so things seem to be going, I created a page for myself over there as well. Seems to be going well. So you can go there, become a member, get the public content for free. If you choose to become a supporter, and the supporter price will be $12 a month, you will get all Project Kids content and all of the glass bead game content. And that means you'll be getting a very lengthy show every week from Michael and I. And you can go over there and either become a member and get the public content or a supporter and get the private content. And that will be launching. That page will go public after this show today. So you guys can go over there and join up that way for those who just want to receive the content, just the recordings. There's nothing else like associated with that. And Michael and I are also working on some other stuff regarding possible like shirts, bags, things like that, with some of this Project Kids sort of adages and nonsense and sayings and things like that on there. And that will be coming at a later point. But yeah, so we just wanted to make that announcement. So the address for our page is projectkids.locals.com, and you guys can go over there and find us there as well.
So, well, first off, thank you for putting all that together because I don't do any of that. Like I just show up and I talk, you know, I don't, that's a considerable amount of effort. And so, you know, I'm grateful that you've done that and you've put all of this content in a place, which is going to be protected from the tide of the internet. So thank you. I want to say that, like, not like as you co-host. So thank you very much for that. Yeah. And secondly, you said something which I want to go and I want to throw this out there, like both to you, but then also like anyone who's watching. So I'd like to see some comments. So we've been talking about gear. And, you know, we both kind of have like a very specific taste with like, you know, material stuff. And so I have, I want to throw out like an idea and tell me if like there's an interest in this. Cause I think this is awesome. Like, you know, from me, I love bags. I don't know why. If you want to look at it from an astrological perspective, it is Sagittarius as fuck. And I have got 4 planets in Sagittarius and my Mars is in the 9th house. Like that just makes sense. Like bags speak to me like you can imagine. So all that being said, so my friend Paul, and I believe you know my friend Paul as well. He's your friend as well. Paul sent me about 50 money bags. Like little money bags, like the bags which the banks used to use to put the money in and they would transfer and do bank shit. and they no longer do that anymore. And, you know, and they're really strong, and they're hemp bags, and they're all stamped. They're stamped with like a bank that's on it. And he sent me all of these, and I turned one of them into a drawstring bag, and it's awesome. And I've been thinking about making, like, turning them in. I know a guy who has industrial machinery for this sort of thing, and I want to turn them all into drawstring bags, and we could get a patch, because we like patches, like a Project Kids patch, and then put that on the bag. So let me give you, this is the like, in the fashion world, don't they have, like, you know, like a line of stuff which is like handmade, and like only like certain people get it, and then they got the stuff they sell in stores. I think couture.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay, so this is the couture bag.
yeah.
So this here is the drawstring. This is from the Federal Reserve. Can you read this? That's an actual Federal Reserve bag used by the Federal, and I use it as a drawstring bag, and it's perfect for all of our travels.
Yeah.
So if there's an interest, I got like 50 of these, and we could go, and this could be one of the first things we could sell. If people like this, if they like this, I would like to like see in the comment, like, yeah, make those bags. I'd be interested in purchasing them. But like, if there's no interest, well, then I'm not going to go around through the effort, because there's other places to put my energy.
What I was thinking, what might be cool as we get further and further into this, is like those kinds of bags would also be like, you can carry your little treasures around, right? And maybe amongst the people who either observe and appreciate the glass bead game, or who decide to play with us, we can get into trading quote unquote beads and other findings and things like that. When somebody has an idea or creates a synchronicity or something that is like, gives you that, like, oh my God, that was really good. Like, instead of clapping, right? Then we send them one of our findings.
We send them beads. I think that's a great idea. I have inside this bag. Let me see if I could show you. I don't think you could see what's inside there, but I just have in here, like, it's like, there are more bags, and like, it's where I carry all my treasures. It's where I carry my treasures. I envision also, like, imagine getting that bag and you got a t-shirt in the bag or something. Like, it's cool. I think it's like, you know, I think those things are cool. And particularly, like, you know, we mentioned this about like the changing of the tides. Like, some of that is like literal moving, like you're moving, like we are going to see a lot of movement happening. And so like bags are a symbol. That's why it's so Sagittarius and so ninth house, because it deals with the idea of travel. And so bags are quite literally ways of organizing your stuff when you're on the road.
Yeah.
And so to tap into that is like, that's a deeper level of what I think these are. And then, like, you know, this, like, there's this an artistic and a thumbing of your nose, I think, of like the whole banking system. Like, I love the fact that they're these money bags, like, you know, and it's fun that way. At least it is. That's the approach which I take to these.
Yeah, and this actually goes perfectly into what we're going to talk about today after I tell you the story about when my crystal broke, right? But we are going to talk a little bit about money today and what it really is and what's behind it. But I like the idea of us having Federal Reserve bags where we keep things that are actually valuable in them. Glass beads.
Listen to that.
Things that have meaning. Instead of the dollars that were always carried around in them, now we're like doing a symbolic act of replacing nonsense with things that have actual thought, intent, meaning, value behind them.
Wow. I didn't even think about that way, but that's a really, really neat way of like owning it and, like, you know, that's fantastic.
All right, cool. So now let me tell you my story about when my crystal broke.
Tell me your broken crystal story.
So I've talked about, like, a number of times this experience that I had at a party on an Indian reservation one time, where I was like downloading all of this information about DNA and encryption and whatnot. And people were saying I was like flitting in and out of reality. So this was back in 2014. This was in 2014. Okay. I went to this party on the Indian reservation, and it was when I had just started working, like, with Anne Baroque. I was cleaning up my diet. I was starting to get well. I wasn't well yet. I was still doing some drugs and things like that, but I had begun on my path towards wellness, right? And I had this amazing party at the Indian reservation where I had all of these crazy metaphysical experiences. One of the things that I did that weekend was, there was an artist there who takes pieces of labradorite, and he has this method he's come up with with like heat, and I think it's crazy glue and etching, where he's able to etch these designs onto these pieces of labradorite, these sacred geometry designs, and they're
Wow.
beautiful. They're stunning. His name is Leafy Greens. Sometimes he's hard to find. He tends to be at like festivals and things like that, right?
I find it hard to believe that Leafy Greens is in the festival scene.
Right? But his work is amazing. So I bought this little piece of labradorite that had like the perfect amount of like iridescence and opalescence kind of on it, right? And on it was etched a flower of life with a Metatron's cube imposed over it, right? And I just loved it. Like I,
That's
like,
some hardcore etching.
it's some hardcore etching. The detail on it was phenomenal. There's no mistakes. There's no little, it was perfect. It looked like somebody had just pressed it, right? But he was showing, he was doing the stuff there. So
Right.
So anywho, so
Hats off to Leafy Green.
Hats off.
I made fun of him a little bit, but like, I love anyone who's good at their craft, particularly if it's a homemade craft. Like, I've got a lot of respect for that.
Really good. So if this video finds its way to Leafy Greens, like, I don't know, maybe you could give us our first finding for one of our bags.
Yeah, exactly. Like if Leafy Greens can show himself in our comments,
right?
We've broken through. And I don't want any imposters. We've got a litmus test.
So Leafy Green. So I bought this thing, and from that point out, like I tended to keep it on me, right? Like I had a little silk bag that I carried around my purse, right? So when I would go to parties, I would put it in my pocket. It felt very protective to me.
How big was it?
About this big, about maybe like a 50-cent piece or a silver dollar.
All right.
Okay.
And he did. Wow. Okay.
Right. Like it was not perfectly round. It was like an unusual shape, but like I could fit it in my pocket and dance comfortably.
Was it around the same size of a piece of labradorite I sent you?
No, it was flatter. It was flat. It was flatter and slightly smaller.
Wow. Okay.
So and I would keep it in this little bag that I also had this Herkimer diamond in, right? Huh. This Herkimer diamond that Anne had given me, right? So like I kept it in the bag together, and I would wear it I'd keep it in my pocket at parties. It would be in my purse, all this kind of stuff. I had it with me. It felt like both that it was somewhat protective, but also that it was helping me to connect. Like by this point, it was very clear to me that I was in connection with something that was either on the other side of the game, my highest self, myself outside of time. Sometimes I questioned whether it was mind control or AI interacting with me, but whatever it was, there was an information exchange that was helping me to move down my track, right? We have to, not everything is smooth on the track towards where you're headed, right? And so it was helping me to bring these experiences that I needed towards me. And also there was some protection around it or whatever. I don't know, right? These were what I was thinking. And I got to a place where like I got clean, right? And I'm not saying it's because of the stone, but I got clean. And then my life started moving into, this different direction where I was starting to become like able to really make things happen. And then I started doing media stuff and whatever. And I started having this situation where like, sometimes I couldn't find it, right? Like I couldn't find the stone. Like I would put it somewhere and I couldn't find it, but I always would find it. And then one day, like the stone, like I dropped it, and before I could stop myself, I stepped on it and I broke it in half. So then I had this broken in half thing, this broken in half piece, right? And I can't remember if I used crazy glue, because that's what he used to make it, to put it back together, or if I left it apart. I think I used crazy glue to put it back together, and it actually stayed really well, right? But it had been broken. And a few months after that was when that was about another 6 months or 8 months or a year later, right? I went out for the evening with a friend, and we had a very weird night out where we started to recognize the way that the scenario regarding eating pizza and the ways that you get into yards. I don't want to get our right. So like that kind of thing, right? Like the eats a pay ate gay, right? The way that it played into your own locale, that there was something going on, right, at some of these kinds of businesses in the after hours that is not part of regular food service. Okay, like something very weird happened, and we discovered that on this entire street that we had been too many times over the course of our lives that there was some kind of ring going on, right?
Mhm.
And that same night, on that same night, my stone disappeared. When I got home, I did not have it. It had been in my purse. When I got home, I did not have it. I never saw it again, right? And I was upset. It was hard for me. But one of the things, when I had originally broken the stone, after I like recovered from the upsettedness of breaking it, I realized that it was symbolic of me having broken my sacred geometry programming, because they do use sacred geometry. Can be a wonderful thing, but it is used heavily in the projects and programs as ways to grid out and map and symbolize and do different things with your mind control. So I think that there was this symbolic thing that I had broken that programming, right? And then when I lost it, was when it happened on this night where I really started to see clearly how this thing that like we talk about has really infiltrated every neighborhood and every locale and whatnot. And when it gets glossed over in this fantastic way, the way that it's happening in your immediacy, it doesn't get shown, right? Like kind of thing. And I had this awareness at the same night that I lost it. So it was kind of like, I had broken the mind control programming, and then that sacred geometry programming was totally gone. It wasn't just, I understood it for what it was, and I understood how it was used, and I could see past it, right? Like I could see the way in which things that are projected out there actually come home. And so I didn't need it anymore. Like the stone had taken me through this journey, right? Where to like identifying my programming, breaking the programming, and then leaving the programming behind and being free to, understand, explore, and sometimes be horrified by the truth of what this world is without something else directing my consciousness the way that it had been for so long. And so like, I love that stone and I still appreciate it. And it served its ultimate purpose. So you and I have talked about all these amazing properties that crystals can be imbued with, and they have an intelligence of their own. And it took me on a journey. It kind of acted like a shaman taking me through like a portion of the vision of the quest or whatever it is. And then it was gone. And I remember it fondly. And also the breaking and the losing of it was part of the experience with it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's,
but it entered for me, it also put me into a new level of the game. And so your crystal just initiated you into the next level of the game.
so yeah, that's definitely what this feels like. And I looked at it like, it's and you and I have talked about this before. Like my approach with crystals is like, there's a relationship which I've seen some people have with crystals, which is unappealing to me. Maybe I'm too grounded. Like that doesn't speak to me, but I get it. There's a certain level where I get it. And so I always like having crystals around. I like to like stones. Like I know there's like something more to that, but I'm comfortable in allowing what's happening to be at an unconscious level, like beyond my conscious awareness, like just kind of a trust in that. So, but there's some crystals, I guess I get a little bit more into. I'm like, well, let me go and like really research the metaphysics, like properties which are associated with it. So this one right here, it's as I told you before, it's called a Lumerian quartz crystal, and it's also a singing crystal. Those could be two different types of crystals, or it could have both of those attributes, and this one had both. And one of the supposed attributes with the Lumerian is they're very, very good at communicating with, maybe off-planet beings, whatever off-planet may mean. Like, I use in a very general sense. And, and I saw it break. I'm like, okay, let me go and sit with that a little bit. I'm like, have I been talking to someone who I shouldn't be talking to anymore? Maybe that relation, maybe it hasn't been in my best interest. or maybe that time, that relationship has come to an end, all of these things. But that's just like what you're saying. It's like, that was kind of like the sense in which I had with this whole sort of experience. Like there was like something that was happening in my own background, just like you were describing with your Labrador light, which was like maybe tapped into, or at least reflected upon the sacred geometry programming, which happened in your own background. Sacred geometry it's like super glue. Like you use the phrase super glue. What sacred geometry is it's a binding.
Yep.
It's a binding of whatever it's being used to be bound. And so super glue is like a great thing for like when you got to go and like put together, let's say, a teacup, like grandma's teacup that broke. But like, you don't want it between your lips. You don't want to put a little bit like in your nostril and then like squeeze it shut. Like that would not be ideal.
And you definitely
and so
don't want it
like,
in your mind, in your brain.
and you definitely don't want. So like, you're absolutely right when you talk about projects and mind control, like there's nothing more powerful than binding a program to an individual in consciousness than with the sacred geometry. So nonetheless, whatever this may mean, like, I had this feeling like, that there was something in my past, whether it's nefarious, whether it's not, but it was like, it's time for that to go. It's time for that to break. And I'm not certain what I want to do with these stones yet. I still have like, a couple ideas of what I'm going to do with it, but I appreciate immensely, like, that kind of shamanic journey sort of, what analogy, which you brought into it. It just got me thinking. It's like, if you know something that you're going to care about, like I've had a lot of time with these crystals, like, in terms of like, I have connected my own internal experience, my own actual experience of being Mike, just living life for, 4 or 5 years, like with these, and this is like gone. There's a part of this which is not going to be there. And it's like this idea of like, well, that is like kind of this nature we have with relationships, and particularly when, like when the relationship, whether it's with a stone or a person or a house or what have you, comes to an end, and you're like, wow, there's a little bit of like emotional body, like discomfort, pain, which comes along with it. And then you're like, but would I have not gone through all of the experiences if I could avoid this temporary pain right now? And so it's like, that seems to be like very, very tied into this as well. Like, going back to, everything is changing right now. There's going to be movement, people moving. And so yeah, so maybe that's how I'm going to go and look at this. So thank you with that.
Absolutely. So I have one more thing on stones for you before we.
All right, hit me.
All right. So in my exploration last week of the connection, and then between the second season of OA and the Lisa Lamb case, right? I did a lot of digging, a lot of researching, a lot of dot connecting and things like that. But in the final episode of OA, the main character, Prairie, Nina Azarova, Britt Marling, right? They're all one and the same. Makes this statement, and there's a lot of things actually in the second season of OA, both seasons of OA, that also lean towards some of the FPV Angel stuff, which you said you wanted to talk about later, also in this identifying things as angels. But this angel, right, Britt Marling, the OA stands for Original Angel, says an angel, and think about this in relation to something we've talked about before, an angel is coal dust pressed down into a diamond by the weight of the world. And this made me think of anthracite and the Herkimer diamonds of Scranton, Pennsylvania, and the Dynevenvelt, or the particle accelerator, that is the thing, that the instrument of this compression, right? This is the instrument that is creating expansion and contraction, expansion and compression, and pressing that coal and that dust down, and then the diamond is created, right? And it kind of that sort of process, and that too goes to the stones. But I wanted to tell you about that because we've talked about some of that here before. We've talked about the anthracite and the Herkimer diamonds, right?
That was a quote from the show.
Yeah,
that was a quote from the show. Interesting. By the way, is this kind of like the shape of what that
Yeah.
Like it was what do they call these? They call these they're cuts, but
Yeah.
there's another word for it. This is a piece of anthracite right here. This is the best piece of anthracite I've ever found. Like it was just like really thin, perfectly flat on this side. Yeah, that's well, that's a good quote. Do we want to switch over to some of that like
Yeah, let's get into, we wanted to talk, and you know, we kind of teased this with the money bags, but we were going to talk a little bit about something that we generally don't talk about because I don't feel that, like, I think you and I are not that moved by it at this point in our life, and it's only there as a means for other experiences in a certain way. But we're going to talk a little bit about money. You made an interesting video this week, and some of these issues have been surfacing in my own life, and so let's stretch them out and play with them.
All right. So I did a video and I posted it last week, a couple days ago, I don't know. And I was talking, and I think it was called like it's called the the foundation, the energetic foundation of debt-based currency. And I don't want to like rehash that video, but like the long and the short of it is debt-based currency from its beginning is based upon there's never going to be enough money. You can never pay back debt-based currency. It's designed that. And so that means everything that comes from that, everything that's built upon it, which is the entire economy, has to be in that harmony. That's just the truth of nature. Like foundation sets the tone for whatever it is. And so that was the beginning of the conversation or of the video. And then the second half, I went into it in my Subscribestar page, because where I really wanted to go with it, because if, you know, we're moving off of this, we're moving off of the old system. You know, we know that we know what's coming. There's going to be a completely digital currency, you know, exactly how that's still being ironed out, you know, but that's what's coming. And I've got an interesting relationship with money in the fact that, you know, I've got a degree in finance. I used to be very, very well versed in money. I used to have a lot of money. And then like, I got out of that. And so it's like, and recognize, you know, so my relationship with money is complex, I guess is what I'm saying. And then kind of like wanting to go and apply that same sort of level to better understand Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, to understand it from a foundational level. And because I've really like extracted myself from money, like I knew that crypto, like I remember like 4 years ago, like, or 5 years ago when they first were like starting to like talk about it a lot and like in the back corners of alternative media, like I was like, money is fucking money. You know, I'm not, you know, like I get it. I get the importance of money in the matrix. And so side note, this is how you know it's a matrix thing. If something has no value outside of the matrix, well, then you know it's just purely matrix. So like a bag of money has got no value outside of the matrix, got no value on a desert island, it's got no value anywhere else. That's not to say, you know, if you're living in the matrix, you still need it. But nonetheless, we're having the changing of the guard right now. The matrix is changing. All this stuff's at play. This is what we're talking about, all this sort of stuff. So I wanted to be able to have a better understanding of cryptocurrency and blockchain technology from like this symbolic energetic level. And I was a little bit surprised when I realized, when I saw that, and this brought me to a couple different places. So you're going to see where I'm going to go with this is different than where I went in the video, but this is what happened. So what really captured my awareness, what really captured my attention was when then I saw that, that Bitcoin, like just Bitcoin, one of the cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin itself requires the same amount of electrical consumption, the amount of energy to fund the server farms that are doing all of like the Bitcoin blockchain stuff, is the equivalent of the country of Argentina, you know, a country of 43 million people. It's requiring that. And so when we're looking at like the debt-based currency, the energy which is fueling that is a little bit like it's a little bit different. Maybe you could call it like magic. I know Tracy talked a lot about the magic of money. And so the understanding the nature of debt base is a little bit different than like sigil magic and some of the other magic, but nonetheless, it's very magical that way. And that's very Pisces age as well, in the fact that there's a lot of like illusionary or like hidden elements, like how the Federal Reserve was created and all that sort of crap. So anyway, so we're looking at cryptocurrency, and cryptocurrency is like on the fundamental level, it's just electricity. I mean, I guess I'm saying the obvious, like, well, of course, yeah, it's it's electronic, but it's like, it's not just like electricity, like normal electricity, like it's huge amounts of electricity. And where I went on with my video was talking about, like, guess what? You know who owns your cryptocurrency? The people who own the electrical power plants. That's who owns it. In the same way that the shareholders of the regional Federal Reserve banks are the owners of the Federal Reserve, it works that way. And guess what? They're the same friggin' people. But that's not what we're talking about right now. Because then I was like, well, if this is all electricity, and I already know that electricity is an inversion to a harmonious life on Earth. I know that. And if you have any questions about it, go read The Invisible Rainbow. But I know that. But I'm not an electrical engineer. But you know what I am? Well connected.
Is that KNECHT or CONNECT?
Probably both. And so I know a lot of different folks. I'm blessed to have friends in a lot of different areas. And I've got a good friend, a couple years older than I am. And this guy, do you know what a nuclear power plant is?
Yeah.
Okay. So can you imagine in your mind, maybe what a nuclear power plant, the people who are doing the nuclear power plant stuff, I picture it how they show us what NASA looks like. You got all of the guys who are on the floor, and then you got the other guys who are on the second floor watching over the guys on the floor. So that's kind of what the inside of a nuclear power plant is. And you got all the guys. So my friend, he's one of the guys on the second floor.
Okay.
All right. So he's as high up in terms of running the power plant without being a purely business guy, because, his boss is all about dollars and cents, but he is the guy who he makes certain that people get power and it's always running, and you don't have a Chernobyl type event. So I go and I get in touch with him. And the guy is he's what do you think that person's going to be like? That's kind of how this guy is. But I've got a really, really nice rapport with him. And I'm like, John, can we sit down? I got some questions for you about electricity. And so we sit down, and I'm like, explain to me what's happening. Explain to me, everything about what I just read about the amount of energy consumption, which Bitcoin was requiring to how are you actually creating the electricity? And so I kind of know how electricity is created. I know from the most basic level, electricity is created by having coiled copper, and you run a magnet over it. That's all it is. But I went in and I talked to him a little bit more, and I was asking him questions. And so what he basically, and I know that the creation of electricity is an inversion. I know that it is a highly weaponized, potent form of something which happens naturally.
So we're talking about created electricity, not naturally occurring electricity. Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. There is harmonious electricity. And I think that there's probably ways in which that can be released. I mean, that's the whole sort of scalar wave technologies of being able to but when you go, and so this is what all the power plants are doing. What they're doing is they have these very, very large coils of copper and these very, very powerful magnets, and they're doing all this sort of stuff. And what's happening. And so he didn't describe it this way, but I verified when I restated kind of what he was saying. And he was like, yeah, that's a fair way of describing it. So what you're doing is you're through the magnets and the coiled copper is it's creating a very, very specific type of field. Like it's a field. And what that field is doing is all of the electricity. This is what all of the electricity, it is being pulled from within the earth. What electricity is it's just electrons from the earth being highly, highly concentrated in these fields, and then they're just sent. You know, it's a current of electricity. And then what happens? It runs its course, it goes to whatever it's going to do, and then it goes back into the earth. Like that's the cycle. That's the cycle. And I'm like, I know that's like it's weaponized, and I mean weaponized because it's used against us. Like electricity is not good for anyone. Like certainly you're like, oh, it powers my light and powers my that. I'm like, well, that's a lack of imagination, and you're doing matrix thinking. But nonetheless, you know, so I began thinking about how that same thing occurs within like the human body and the human field. You know, and I started thinking about the coils, you know, the coils of copper, you know, the coils of copper being in like the electrical power plant, but like the coils which would surround you or surround me, and then the movements of the magnets. And I was thinking about what we've talked about a lot before with for you, like with dancing, but any type of movements, particularly the spinning movement, and then wanting to take it one step further and to become conscious with it. The thing which we can learn by looking at inversion is we can reverse engineer a truth. Yeah. Which is like, you know, the pulling up of the electrons and then the putting them back down, and then using that power. And the question is like, what are we going to use that power for? Like, what are you building this current up for? What are you building this current up? Particularly doing this in light, you know, as I said before, with like the spinning, with Qigong, anything which is really, really energy sort of based. And then that's when, and this is the question which I have for you, is like I want to then go, and what I don't understand is what exactly is the theory, the idea behind the first person viewing technology. And I want to go and be able to see how that will connect into the human being literally creating their own miniature version of these power plants. So you're not part of this power plant system, and seeing as this is part of like breaking out of this old way of being. So that's kind of where I was. Oh, and here's the other thing. So blockchain, I just want to finish this before we go down there, because I want to just say this for anyone who's wondering. So when the internet came out, everyone's like, oh, the internet's the world's greatest thing. It's going to make your life friggin' awesome. And then it was called the net, and it's called the web. And the reason why they called it that was because it was meant to trap you there. What was it meant to trap you there? If you go and you look at the history of the internet was, you know, obviously created from ARPANET, but the division of the Department of Defense that did that was behavioral sciences.
Of course.
Why the fuck is it not, you know, you're given this story about how it's about something else. It's always about controlling to tap you in. So guess what? The same thing with blockchain technology. If you go and you know the history, the history of the slave trade, this is what would happen. If you're a slave, thousands and thousands of years of slavery, it's the oldest profession. That's the oldest profession, the slave trade. Yep. You know, unfortunately, that's the oldest profession on earth. Slaves are put on the block, and then they're put in chains. Yeah. Just in the same way that the web and the net told you from day one what the internet was all about, that's blockchain. Now, to the degree of the slavery and what you're going to be a slave to, well, then, you know, you can use your own imagination, because that is not materialized yet. But, you know, that's the writing on the wall. So that's why I'm interested in talking about the other stuff, is like, you know, it doesn't do any good with pointing out like, oh, this is going to be bad stuff. You're going to be, you know, well, what else are you going to do? We need to talk about like other sort of exciting, fun, and freedom technologies.
Okay. So, all right. You just did a lot there. So first of all,
oh yeah.
Okay. So just as it with the debt-based Federal Reserve System, right? Like I think that blockchain technologies and we're hearing a lot of people right now are very excited about blockchain technologies, about like these pyramid schemes that are called gifting, all these different ways of earning money and stuff like that, I think that they're all same boss, new boss, same as the old boss, based on the same system you're talking about. And I don't think that there's any that are going to save us or get us into a level of freedom that we all dream and fantasize about by participating in them. But the one benefit I think from participating, and you know this because you participated in the one that you participated in, and it taught you something about how it works, right? So as we're presented with these things, I think avoiding them completely, even though that sounds wonderful to me a lot of times, where I'm just like, I don't like money, I'm going to live outside of that, I don't want that. But the fact of the matter is it's here and it's ever present. And so learning to understand how they work helps us to understand exactly what you're talking about.
If you have a foot in the matrix, you're going to have to play with the matrix game one way or the other.
So this is not a pro or anti. These currencies are simply something that at this point are. So understanding them is probably important, right?
Right. And that was the first part of the video, was the emotional connection we have to all of the money.
So I do think it's important for us sometimes to test what our relationship is to these things, right? By seeing, can I play with this well enough to understand it without getting emotionally attached in a way that makes me act like a monster? And if you find yourself outside of yourself when you're doing these transactions or acting like a monster, you have some things to look at that have nothing to do with money, right? And this is how money is being used to manipulate you, right? So to your larger question, so I think that like electricity is something, there's a natural kind, like obviously I do believe we live in an electric universe, right?
Without a doubt, without a doubt.
But what is this containment and control of electricity is the inversion you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. And the creation of it.
Well, I think, yes, doing some things that are like false type of creation of it, or this intentionally creating more of something than you need, so that you're not only providing for yourself, but you're now capturing it and then overcharging other people instead of telling them that
everything with it, the equipment, all of that sort of stuff. It's like cocaine, cocaine comes from the coca leaf, and it's like, but when you process it and you weaponize it, like, wow, this is friggin' awesome, because of like how your body first responds to it, but it will eventually destroy your body. That's the inversion. Like, we live in an electrical universe, but like what we're doing with electricity right now is an inversion of it.
If there's a thing and it has to go through a process in a laboratory or in a refinement plant, then it is somehow being metered or used to control you. Period. End of story. Right?
End of story.
Okay. So we're in this situation now where it's like, we're things like exotic energy technologies like cold fusion, or we hear about solar and wind and all that kind of stuff, right? But the place that people really want to break through to, because they think that this is free energy technology, is ideas of like plasma technology, cold fusion, that kind of stuff, right? Like the people who are on the cutting edge, like the same people who are interested in cryptocurrencies, right, are interested in like that stuff, right? And in my opinion, the people who own the farms where they're mining all this stuff, they're using free energy. They're using cold fusion to do it. So they're not actually paying an electric bill to do that kind of, they're letting us think that they're using their electricity, but really they figured out how to harness this free energy and whatever, right? So, so that's another discussion. But so now the next thing is like, people are like, we want these devices. We want these devices where we can, maybe we buy the device or we spend the time to go through all the blueprints and build our own cold fusion device. And we have this thing and we can run stuff off of it. And there's actually nothing wrong with that. It's like putting training wheels on your bicycle, right? Sometimes you have to like go, okay, I have these training wheels that help me while I figure out how to do it myself, right? So this is kind of a midpoint of that. Right. But in some ways, that is still, if not a complete inversion, like the metered thing that we have now, it's still a perversion, because of the truth of the matter is that we are free energy devices.
Exactly.
Okay. So we are. So the fascinating thing about the FPV Angel, which is first person view, is what it stands for. right? The and this is not, I'm not here to say that they're all right or they're all wrong. It is over my head and it is fascinating, but I do think I understand the underlying theme of it. And that I completely agree with. This goes to Walter Russell again. And I think that like, if we have a local expert in Walter Russell, please reach out and because I think that I would like to understand more about that. And at this point, my pile of books is so high, I don't know how I'll ever get through them. But this basically, Walter Russell had this machine that he sort of described that he saw in his, his visionary experiences, I think. And what, according to FPV Angel, the Earth is, and again, I'm not getting this perfect, right? I'm trying to do the best I can to get it. The Earth is basically like a free energy device. It's like a machine that has all of these parts that generate energy, right? It's got a machine inside that includes all of these particle accelerators, and it goes through cycles of expansion and cycles of compression, right? And there's a ton of energy being created. And this energy is so strong that it actually causes things to happen materially, right? And then we call that nature, right? And so I think that like the way some of this stuff from the ancient world that we all look at and go, wow, that it's hung around or that it was created was by being in harmony with these nodes in the machine, these particle accelerators, these area where the energy is being generated. Now, I don't know if the Earth was like a machine that was built by a creator. I don't know how, there's part of me that is like, should we call the Earth a machine? But I'm just calling it that for the ease of explaining how this works. So the Earth has something embedded inside of it, just like we have, a spinal cord and all of this intricate like wiring of our, veins. And I don't know the technical terms, Laura's better, but we have all of this stuff in our body that does the same thing that these like particle accelerators kinds of stuff do. It creates energy, it moves it around, it processes it, it changes it from one form to the next. All that kind of stuff exists in the Earth and exists in our bodies. We are like fractals of the Earth, right? Like we are not living here on the Earth, though we are part of the Earth. It is a symbiotic relationship to a certain extent that obviously has gotten a little out of balance and whatnot. But I used to refer to myself as a techno fusion device, because when I dance and I listen to techno music, I can create endless amounts of energy. I can just keep going and going and going. The Energizer bunny rabbit kind of thing. People would jokingly call me that. But I don't think that we require an external source of energy for life to continue. We are capable of creating it and creating the energy that we're going to use ourselves, just as the Earth is creating it. Now, I don't think the Earth has a problem with us harmoniously tapping into some of these power spots that generate it, but you have to be in harmony with it. And that doesn't mean capturing it and selling it to somebody else who doesn't know about it at expensive rates, right? That is, there's an ethical use of nature and the things that it provides. And then there's a not ethical use. These elite people are not really creating energy. They're harnessing something that is here for the entirety of the environment and making it unaffordable to other people who need it to live, right? They're doing something. It's like they're getting, they figure something out, and then, not only do they monetize it, but they weaponize it, not just in the way it's used, but even in the way people think about it and what they think it is, right? It's a mess. So when I visited Rob Stewart a few months ago and I started telling him about this FPV Angel stuff, he's like, I think we're particle accelerators too. And I was like, exactly. That's like the same thing. Like every process which is happening in the Earth is happening within our bodies. And I think it works the best when our body is in harmony with that process in the Earth. Right. So like, I think that like we're capable of doing it ourselves, but we've all been in places where we're like, when I go to this city, like I have no energy, I'm tired. Right. Like it's like, and then there's other places where like when you visit this place, you always feel energized and jazzed and good. Like for some reason, your local particle accelerator is in better harmony with the one there, with that node on the Earth or whatever. Like that might be a better place for you. Or I think we can also learn to become in harmony with where we're at, but it has to be something that is done with intention. I don't think it just happens, right? Like it's something we have to work on to become in harmony with our environment. So the Walter Russell stuff, basically the process that is being described in the way that the FPV Angel described what's going on under the ground and creating our environment, is this process of free energy, right? And that's what basically Walter Russell is talking about. And it's these cycles of expansion and compression, which is the same way energy works. Like we build it up, we store it, and then we release it, right? It's the same as like compressing, expanding, right? And then compressing, it's like a similar kind of thing. And so what you see now, in my opinion, is instead of like, more people coming into the awareness of this, that we are capable of generating everything that we need if we live in harmony with the earth, and if we take proper care of our bodies and our minds, because there's mental energy too, right? Thought energy is a thing, physical energy is a thing. What we're next being sold on is like this process of blockchain technology, right? Which and this process of like, okay, well, maybe we're going to have some better kinds of energy, that cleaner energy or more natural energy, but it's either going to be that you have to have the solar panel or the wind turbine, or if you're really exotic and out there, you can build yourself some kind of free energy device, but everything has to run through that, right? Which is still like having the training wheel on the bicycle, right? Now you're not you're not having somebody, you're not paying somebody to drive you around. You have a training wheel on your bike, but it still isn't letting you in on the awareness that like you are an energy creator, not a consumer. They tell us we're consumers, we're useless eaters. No, we're not, because we're creating energy all the time. That's actually part of the energy that they're capturing to do their magic, but they're not telling us that. So they're disenfranchising us from our own energy, and we've participated in that disenfranchisement. So this isn't like just a blame game kind of thing, but you even see now with Bill Gates's patent 060606, where it's talking about, having devices that we're not clear if they're be inside the body or outside the body, that use people's physical generation of energy to mine cryptocurrency, right? Well, why not just use your body to create your energy and use it yourself, right? Like, why not, I understand that sometimes you have to have something like a medium that goes between things, that like to convert, but like, why do I need to have a device that allows my energy to mine cryptocurrency, which I can then earn to pay the electric company for my electricity? Why not just like there be something that I create, or that is where I can, if I'm doing something and I want to create a lot of energy and then store it for use later, I can just do it myself. Why does it have to have a patent and go through Bill Gates and be mined on the blockchain and then be using that money to send it to that seems like it's a waste of that energy that I just created. Like they're using more than half of the energy before I even get anything in return. Right? And that is the process by which economies are created, right? So then you have an electric company that provides jobs for people that they're going to be miserable at their whole lives and hurt their back at. So then when they finally can retire, they can't enjoy any of the energy that they create. The whole thing is a fucking sick perversion. But, the basic thing is that, we are the prime creators of energy here on Earth. The Earth itself creates energy, and we create energy. And the cleanest energy is created when we do it in harmony with the earth, right? So that's perfectly clean energy right there. And this idea that there has to be all of these stop gates, fixtures, technological processes, hashing of algorithms, blah, 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 that come in between us and ourselves is like the perversion of the inversion, right? So I just said a lot of stuff there. I don't know if any of that.
So yeah. I wanna respond to a lot of that. So all of what you're describing is what I call the matrix. Mm-hmm. All of that is the matrix, and the matrix is primarily a thought. It's like the way you think reality has to work. And whenever you go back to, well, I need this, I need to have that. That's always self-reflective matrix thinking. And so in the most general sense, the terminology I use is the matrix, which exists in the simulation being like Earth, and then the greater reality, whatever the hell Earth's in, right? You know, those are the three. And it's like
Yeah.
our consciousness is two things. One is where we put our awareness, and then the second part is like how we define it. And our we all have unique consciousnesses, which go back to these databases, like a matrix database, a simulation database, or a greater reality database. And as long as you are in a consciousness, which is primarily defining what you are seeing in matrix reality, like, you know, it's just so it's all that sort of stuff. I agree with you completely. And so, or we're on the same page. There's nothing to agree with. It's more so like we're on the same page. We see things from the same perspective.
Yeah.
But this is what I want to point out. So we are quite literally, like, here's an analogy to understand what's happening right now. We are in the midst of the changing of the guards. One matrix system is being brought down, and another matrix system is being brought up. Now, I mean, actually, it's been happening for a long time, but like right now is it. And so look at it like, you know, maybe from a prison perspective or like Buckingham Palace perspective, but it's like, you know, there's a shift. Let's say the shift ends at like 9 a.m. and like around 8:30 a.m., like all the guards are like, yeah, I got 30 minutes left. You know, I got 15 minutes left. And they're starting to like, maybe like clean it up, like finishing, like whatever that transition happens. So the best time, you know, and I'm not saying this from experience, I'm just saying this from common sense. The best time to do your breakout,
Yeah.
is during the changing of the friggin' guards.
Totally.
And we are in the changing of the guards, because what happens is once the new guards come in, then they like lock it all down, and it's harder to do that. Now, to make that a little bit more tangible. So what's happening right now, what is clear right now, versus when you're not in a changing of the guard scenario, and who knows how long it'll be, 10 years, you know, I don't know. It is very clear what is the matrix and what is not the matrix. What is the matrix? The stuff that's going away and the stuff that's coming new. Like that's it. That's where you see the matrix. But when you are not in these major transitions, you just assume that's the way everything is. So all of that being said, this is what I'm interested in, and this is what I think we're totally capable of. So everything you're saying about like the humanity and being the energy generator, without a doubt, we're energy generator. You know, all the, you know, our energy being usurped by the matrix controllers. Yes, that's the nature of the matrix. You know, it's probably above all of our, we can come up with ideas, but it's above all of our, you know, pay grades to know, like, what is the matrix ruler thinking? Like, why are they doing it? What are they doing with all of this energy? But they are, and we want to take that back. I also want to say this. You were talking about the economies and all of this. Again, it's all embedded in word. Business, yep. Busyness. It's to keep your ass busy.
Yep.
There's nothing more than that. It's just made up shit to keep you busy. But anyway, so what I'm thinking with all of this is, and particularly in light of looking at like this is the idea which is given to us, is that these coils are literally pulling the energy out of the earth. They're calling it electrons. Maybe someone will call it something else. When's the last time you saw an electron? Guess what? Never. It's a made up sort of thing. So it gets to be whatever you want it to be. But there's something from the earth which is going through you, which has to go back to the earth, and then you're going to do something with it. And you're the one who gets to come up with that. Now, this is where our creativity comes up. And this is where I also think like our physicality comes into it. This is the spinning aspect, I think, is very, very key. But then we also have to have like, well, what you have to have a plan. You have to have an understanding of what are you doing with this energy. And we go back and we look at the matrix, where they're pulling this energy out and they're running it through devices in order to do something. All right, well, then I'm pulling up this energy right now. I'm in harmony with it. I'm already in harmony with it. I don't need anyone to, I'm in harmony with it. You're in harmony with it too. As soon as you realize there's something to be freaking in harmony with, you're in harmony with it. So it's impossible not to be in harmony with it. You wouldn't be breathing. You'd be dead. You would have exploded. Like it's that's a fallacy to think you're not. But anyway, so then I think where the growth of this is like, what do we do with this energy? And then how do we, like, it's not to power up your computers. Like, that's part of the matrix thinking. That's what Iron Man's all about. Oh, if I could be a billionaire Iron Man, I would have in my chest the energy creator. But who are you going to buy the energy creator from? It's still part of it. Oh, I can create my own energy and fuel my own and power up my own laptop. You're in the fucking matrix. Guess what? You don't need matrixes. You need stuff where you don't need to buy, but we need to learn how to be able to do real things. And so this is where I want to go with all this. And this is where we always go with this, Emily. So the more we talk about it, the more real it becomes. And it's like to be able to go in and out of the matrix.
Yes.
To be able to understand that.
Yeah, that's the only thing that there is. Yes.
That's the only game for us to play. How do we go in? How do we go out? And what does that mean? Travel, time travel. Guess what? And this is the beauty of the friggin' matrix. This is the beauty of the matrix they're building for us right now. This is the beauty of the matrix. So once that skill, and this is why I think gymnastics is so friggin' such a great analogy, is because if you don't know how someone learns how to do 15 flips, like, on the floor exercise, you're going to think it's friggin' magic. But when you begin to see, like, well, no, it's broken down into these incremental improvements, or like doing flips on a balance beam, like, oh, of course, like, obviously there requires the skill set, but it's not like you go from A to Z. There's a B, C, D. Same thing with what we're talking about. And the better we can understand it, the better we can play with it. So this is the beauty of what they're creating for us, because we're going to be able to pull in our own energy, because we are able to go and create our own, like, within our own field, within our own physical body, like, to go and pull in the energy, just as like any of these power plants do. We can very easily tap into electronic currency. But the problem is you can't be part of it, because the electronic currency will be easier to access if you know what you're doing than, per se, like physical currency.
Okay.
Like think about the person who was able to go in and out of the matrix in the old matrix.
Okay.
Like, let's say, like, you're a time traveler. You go back to 1843. And you're like, all right, I'm in 1843. I'm walking around, Dodge City. And you're like, I need to get some dollars in my pocket. How are you going to get those dollars in your pocket? Maybe from another time traveler. Maybe you leave pockets of money like throughout the place. I don't know. Like, use your imagination. Like, literally, this is reality. We don't like to think of it. We're told that's fantasy. So in this other version, and if we're getting out of the matrix, remember, there's no time, so we could always go back and do that. But in this other version, it's going to be simplistic, I think, because it's all electronic. So that's what I think is also kind of very exciting about what's emerging, is because I think that's going to be, and I mean this in an escaping the matrix, not within the matrix way of hacking it.
Okay, so I'm trying to get. So we're going to use we're going to use the electricity to travel. Is that right? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know. All I know is it's just what you said. You said it yourself. It's an electric universe. What the next step is, I don't know.
Well, remember,
but before you get to that, like, next applicable step, you need to know what that step is. And what that would be is, like, well, this is what I want to do. I want to be able to jump.
Yes.
I want to be able to go in and out. I want to go and travel. I want to go and do this. I want to go. Like, what would you do if all of these things, which we just said, were within your ability of total control, of total self-mastery? What would you do here?
Okay. So, this goes to the OA stuff that I've been talking about and covering, because that's what they're doing. They're jumping, right? And it's presented in all of these series and TV shows and movies we see about time traveling or portal magic or things like that. It's presented slightly different each time, right? There's some similarities, but, like, basically the overarching story of this one is that angels are travelers, right? So and if we think about it, like, we associate particle accelerators with time travel, or creating holes in the fabric of space and time. So I think that's a nod to that idea that's being presented in the show. And basically there are there's lots of people don't know how to jump or travel, but even within the ones that do know how to jump and travel, there are these jumpers that just they keep jumping from dimension to dimension to run away or hide from something that's in another one. So they are the same asshole in every level of reality, right? And then there's others who are really the more magical kind of time travelers that when they jump from one reality to the next, they go and they inhabit their new body, which is the same person but in a different reality, and they integrate. Right? They actually, instead of suppressing the personality of the new body that they're in, they integrate that and they become more, right? And to me, like what's been playing around with all this, and we talked about this, was that that's really been sort of the main high secret of like the secret societies as they originally were intended, right? Is that it's basically a way to reincarnate in another reality or to jump into another reality, but maintain your memories, maintain your experiences, maintain your knowledge. And then it started to get distorted by these people who started to use it to control others. And so those people then are jumping to the next level, suppressing the new personality and being the same asshole, right? And not really creating any energy that is like an add value to their new reality, right? And the way that these people are there's like a variety of ways to jump, right? But it requires fuel, it requires energy, but it's energy that you create yourself, right? Or with other people. And then there's sort of like the intention and the consciousness behind it as well, that differentiates certain kind of travelers from other kinds of travelers, right? And the ones that do this more conscious or integral kind of traveling, they're the angels. And then the other one, you get the other ones are like basically your typical standard MK Ultra doctors, right? But I think that's the whole thing. I think that at this point, like the original secreting of the information with some secret societies was because of there being a fear that people would use it this other way. And at this point, the secret societies have become a place where it's used this other way, right? Like where it's used to suppress the consciousness of the reality that you're going into and dominate it the same way you were trying to dominate.
Right.
Right. So it's movement. It's movement, right? It's like you're spinning to your spinning. It's intention. It's intentional movement. It's movement with intent, and intent to part of the intent is to acknowledge and incorporate and integrate and value all of reality, all of nature, not just highlight the parts that you're in control of and suppress the rest.
Yeah. I mean, this is one of the things which I think is, like that's such a big topic right now in terms of like, really valuing nature and stuff like that. But I think it's because we're so inverted, like in another environment, like that's not even thought of. Like, it's like, why is that even a thought? Like, how could you not value, you know what I mean? It's so integrated. Your idea, the way you expressed secret societies is very, very interesting. And like what kind of like clicked in my mind immediately is the secret, as you were describing, like, one of the models which we've been given through Hollywood is that like, they're integrated bodies with travelers, right? Like secret societies are the vehicle for a coming traveler where they can land safely.
Mm-hmm.
Like we know we're all part of it. We're all part of it. So that seems to make a lot of sense. What I think would be really interesting is if someone were to ever do this. Like imagine if someone were to go and take it as their study, to look at all of like the popular culture, maybe just even TV shows and movies that deal with these topics, because you're right, there've been quite a few of them and they're slightly different with what they say is like how the technology or the capability works.
or what the parameters of the rules
the
around.
parameters are. And what would be interesting is if you take those and then you eliminate everything which is matrix inversions.
Okay.
Like, oh, you need to have this piece of piece of equipment which was developed, you take away all of that and you keep the stuff which is like inherently true in every scenario. And I wonder what the sum total of all of those pieces of information, what that would look like.
Yeah, so we would do a filtration process here and just find out what the few little actual, like the things that are factors in every version of that aren't.
Well, not even necessarily, they don't even have to be in all of them. They could just be like this, but they're not inversions. Like there's certain things you're like, no, that's an inversion. You are continuing along this idea that there has to be some degree of control. And I would say anything which is outside of your own inherent capabilities is going to be a degree of inversion.
Yes.
And if it's outside of your control, then there has to be a degree of domination. And so that's like the chasing of the thing. Like, there's always these dominators, and then there are these people, these freedom lovers, the freedom lovers and the dominators. That's the nature. That's, and so then the next question I have for you is like, when was it that you thought that you became integrated? When your crystal broke?
Oh, so that's interesting. Well, I'll tell you this. There's another thing that goes along with this. This is, I think it was in between the time when the crystal broke and when I lost it, right? I was in the Whole Foods in Austin, and I was upstairs, the big Whole Foods in downtown Austin. I was upstairs with Robert Phoenix, and he was giving me an astrology reading, right? And he said at one point when he was looking at my chart, he's like, your consciousness is about to go psychedelic. And at the moment he said that, a light bulb burst up in the store, up in the cafe where we were sitting, and the entire store, a huge store, turned around and looked at us sitting there, right? So I think these things break. These things, glass, it's all similar kind of material, crystallized material, right? It's something that has had extreme exposure to heat and then cooled back into some sort of design or shape or item or whatever. When those things can no longer bear the amount of expansion that's happening, because that's where the breakthrough is, right? And so they pop or crack or break. Like they can't take the expansion cycle is complete to a certain extent. Like you've broken through to the next level.
So what I think what that's part of, like the the bags we were talking about in the beginning, the bank bags.
Yeah.
So those are jumper bags, right? These are like, this is what you got to take. So when you get a jump, like you got to take, like, I don't know what, like whatever's on your person. Like you don't maybe you do come out naked. Do you think you come out naked on the other side, or do you think like you're wearing like whatever's like touching your body, or are you just going into someone else's physical body and that's what you meant with the integration?
So I've seen it presented a lot of different ways, but I think generally you're like, so in OA, you're going into your same body that has a different consciousness in it. And when you arrive there's this period of time where it's like whose consciousness will reign supreme, or that you can blend with it, right? Kind of thing.
All right.
Right. Now, fusion is a much healthier way to create energy than fission. Right. So nuclear is based on fission, and like cold fusion or free energy is based on fusion, bringing things together or tearing them apart. Those are the two ways to create energy: ripping something apart or blending things together. Right. Fusion, fission. Okay.
So fission is the pulling apart.
Fission is pulling apart, and fusion is bringing together. Right.
Okay. Oh yeah, because you're fusing. Now I can remember. If I have a mnemonic device, I'll remember. But if not, it's just down the memory hole.
So in this one, it's like that come in, then there's two consciousnesses and they need to integrate. And the way you integrate is by going to that point of trauma where they split in the first place, right? So when you are facing yourself in another reality, there was a point in which that reality forked off from the one that you were in. And in the case of Prairie Nina Azarova, it was this bus accident when she was a child, right? So she went back to that point and sort of resolved whatever that trauma was. And then she was able to accept that now there's both Nina Azarova and Prairie living together in this body, and she's much greater for it. It's part of like the, becoming an angel kind of thing, right? So there's that model of it. Then like in the altered carbon, they're just basically going into new sleeves all the time. So they're ending up in different people's bodies, right? In Travelers, they're jumping into somebody's body who's about to die, but they jump in before they die. So they're going into different bodies, not the same. So I don't know the way in which it works, but I would say a hint to the idea that maybe it's the way it is in OA is when we see these celebrities, right, who we can find somebody who looks just like them from the 1800s, from the whatever, right? Like that, you know, that may be a hint. I don't know. I don't.
Right.
My guess would be that there's multiple ways it happens depending on the method you use.
All right, that's what I like. There are multiple methods. There are
Yeah.
multiple methods. So I think maybe that's the first sort of like, that's a decision which a conscious jumper has to make, is what method they want.
There's also an episode of Fringe called Soul Magnets, which was
All
a
right.
technology that they had been trying to tinker with in the mind control programs there, right? And by using this soul magnet technology, they were able to bring William Bell into Olivia's body. So then he was inhabiting her body for a period. And this episode is called Soul Magnets. You can look it up. So I think, and this goes to what you were talking about with energy creation and magnets, you know, and whatnot. So, you know, I think, I think there's multiple ways. I think there's multiple methods, probably an endless array, just like there's an endless array of ways to play the game. There's an endless array of methods you can use with a variety of different outcomes. And I'm sure there are parameters for each that, like, when these situations are part of the method, or these principles are part of the method, you always get this, right? When these ones, you always get that. If you combine this one with that one, you get something a little different, right? So it's just like chemistry or cooking, right? When you're cooking or baking or whatever, if you put the same ingredients in and you do the same process, you generally get a very similar kind of result. When you tinker with something, like if you accidentally use baking powder instead of baking soda or something like that, you still get something, but it's not the same. Yeah.
All right. This feels like a good place for us to maybe take a break before we go into the second hour.
Absolutely. So before we leave the public hour, why don't you tell people about your new offerings on Subscribestar?
Let's see. So I'm gonna drastically reduce the amount of content I'm putting out on YouTube. For a variety of reasons. And the majority of the content which I create, which is not on other people's shows, like Emily's here, and I also like to go on lots of other podcasts, that will all be found on my Subscribestar page, which is Subscribestar Susquehanna Alchemy. And then always, you know, you can go through the Susquehanna Alchemy website, susquehannaalchemy.com. And that's where I do all of my one-on-one work. And now would be a really good time to order a biomancy session. Sometimes I've got like a long lag before I get with someone. Right now, I'm probably about a week out with people. So if that's something you've been thinking about, go and do that. Because my favorite thing to do is to go look at people's stories and then do this type of glass bead game to individuals.
Absolutely. All right. We're going to move over into the second segment. You can join us at patreon.com/offplanetmedia or projectkids.locals.com to get the rest. We'll see you over there. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.